What's going on, everyone? My name's Eric, and today on the channel we're going to be doing a deep dive on a very crucial and important piece of gear that you might not know about that is going to get you closer to that Dimebag Daryl guitar sound. We're going to be checking out the all-original and very killer-looking MXR 126 Flanger Doubler. This is very important to the Dimebag sound for a couple different reasons, which we're going to be getting into later on in this video. I do want to shout out my friend Ryan Day, who's let me borrow this for a good amount of time, as this is a very rare piece of gear. You don't really see them that often, and let alone you don't really see MXR rack units that often. So thank you, Ryan, for letting me borrow this. What we're going to do is do a little bit of a deep dive on this MXR unit and what it's all about. You're going to hear it as well. And then you're going to bring on another piece of gear that kind of resembles this, but it's made by a different manufacturer because you cannot buy these anymore. And to be honest, living with a older piece of rack gear is maybe not the most easiest to integrate into a general live rig. Here we go. All right, so the story of the MXR Flanger starts all the way back in the late 70s, if not the early 80s, when this product was roughly released. And this was made famous by a lot of notable players such as Eric Johnson, Eddie Van Halen, Zakk Wylde, and obviously why it's on this channel is because of Dimebag Daryl. And from my own research, it seemed like this product was really designed for studio use only, and then it wasn't until later on when those aforementioned guitar players really took this and integrated it into their live rig. Now, you might think that a lot of players are using this for the flanging effect, and some people could be using it for the flanger effect for sure, but players like Dimebag and some of the aforementioned guitar players who are the only guitar player in the band or the projects that they're in probably use the doubler side more often because a doubler essentially doubles the single guitar sound. So you would plug your guitar into here, turn this onto the doubler sound, and you would kind of get like a bit of a stereo delay, if not a chorusing sound, to actually make your guitar sound bigger than it actually is, which is a very cool studio trick. And to echo an earlier point, like this was designed in the studio and to get a lot of those studio tricks, but then a lot of guitar players took these studio units and integrated it to their live guitar rigs just to capture that studio sound live. Now, doing a bit of a deep dive on the MXR Flanger, there's a couple components that really give this its unique sound, which a lot of other companies are trying to capture in their own flangers, choruses, and doubling kinds of pedals. These include bucket brigade chips. These ones are made by the company Redicon, and one of them is called the 1024 and the other one is the R5101. It's a bit of a nerdy deep dive there, but those components, from my reading, are the key to this sound. And those components are not made anymore as far as I know, and I'm not sure if there are any sort of new alternatives, but those components give this its signature sound, and it gives us the sound of maybe our youth or some of the very famous guitar tones that we all grew up with. Now, that was a really quick overview of the MXR Flanger. I'm gonna link below to two websites that do a really good job of going in depth of this thing if you wanna learn a little bit more about this unit. So click those links after this video if you wanna learn a little bit more on the MXR 126 Flanger Doubler. Now, bringing this full circle to the whole Dimebag and Pantera context, the Flanger Doubler was operated off stage by Dimebag's guitar tech Grady Champion. So he would actually be operating these different functions right on here in real time based on the song and based on what Dimebag was playing. Either punching it in and out, maybe using the flanger or the doubling function, using the invert function here, and actually changing all of these settings based on the actual riff that was going on. Very, very neat how Dimebag and Grady were working in conjunction with each other to get those very iconic guitar tones. You could hear this on a couple live versions of the song, Slaughtered, as well as wherever they were kind of feeling the flanger would maybe fit for some certain parts. Although the doubling effect was used most of the time to kind of give that stereo split and that two guitar player sound out of one guitar, which is very cool. Something else that I do want to mention after messing around with this, that doubling sound kind of acts as a bit of a chorus in some way. It sounds really good, so this could also be a bit of a chorus pedal depending on how you might want to set this thing up. It's really cool, it's very versatile. I wouldn't be surprised if it was left on and maybe cranked up for a bit more of a chorusing sound for some of those clean parts when Pantera was playing live. And even most recently, I've had the privilege of watching Pantera with Zakk Wylde and Charlie Benante in the Pantera 2.0 celebration. They brought the Flanger Doubler out for Zakk Wylde, and I could see Grady Champion, who was Dimebag's guitar tech and now Zakk Wylde's guitar tech, operating this in real time to get the sounds that they were looking for the certain parts of the song. And again, I do think that's a really sweet thing that there was no real one setting, set it and forget it kind of deal. This unit was very much a two-person operation to get some really cool sounds out of it, so I do encourage you to try that if you have the ability to. So at this point in the video, we're going to hear the MXR Flanger Doubler on its own. I'm going to go through and show you what every control does, so then you could hear what it does in real time, plugging it into my EVH 5150 Iconic, and this is going to be in the effects loop of it. So that was a quick walkthrough of the Flanger Doubler and just showing you what all the different controls do and how they all sound when you start interacting with this unit. The only thing about this unit is that, well, you can't really get it anymore, as I might have said earlier. These things have been discontinued for quite a while, and the prices on them are going up, and it doesn't seem like they're really coming down, which is a little problematic if a lot of us really want these things. The chips that are really giving that MXR Flanger Doubler its iconic sound are not in production. There's a couple units that maybe use the same chips as well, including the original Electro-Harmonic Electric Mistress, which is another flanger. But then again, that's another older piece of gear and it is quite expensive. So you might be wondering, like, well, how do I get this on a budget? And that's where we enter this. This is the Flanger Doubler from DB Effects. They are a company from the Philippines, and I'm borrowing this from my buddy Matt, who's also in one of the Dimebag groups. Shout out Matt, thank you for letting me borrow this for quite some time. And if you haven't seen this before, I've used this in my Dimebag pedal board rig from hell build that I did last year, recreating Dimebag's rig through pedals. I got a video on that, check it out, it's on the channel, I'm gonna link it. Very cool thing about this is that obviously it's in a stomp box version. I can toggle the tones in and out as I do please. I remember plugging this in for the first time thinking like, wow, this is a really killer flanger sound. And you know, it sounds like Slaughtered, it sounds like Hellbound, it does the things that you want for a Pantera guitar sound. So I'm gonna run through this and just give you all a one-over once again of how this pedal sounds. You're gonna move through all the controls. And once again, we're gonna be plugging into my 5150 Iconic, and this is going in the effects loop. Alright, so at this point we're going to compare the old MXR 126 to the brand new Flanger Doubler from DB Effects. Now this is not to say which one is better because this is the original. What we're going to do is really see how this one stacks up, especially because this one I believe is only around maybe $400 American. So it's a bit more of a budget-friendly version when you are looking at the prices of these ones going on. Again, same thing in the effects loop of the 5150 iconic for all of these. All of the riffs in standard E are going to be played on my Washburn D3 Bolt, Bill Lawrence XL500 in the bridge, and all the detuning songs and riffs are going to be played on my Washburn Culprit with the same pickup in the bridge. Here we go. Alright, so now after listening back to the MXR versus the DB effects, just on their own and just how the controls all interact with each other, I will say that the MXR Flanger Doubler has a better overall frequency response, and I'm able to use the one set of tonal controls right here and just kind of leave them and interchange them through the flanger and the doubler setting, and things are going to sound pretty good. I will say on the DB effects unit, that was not really the case. It seemed like you kind of had to have one really good flanger sound or one really good doubler sound. I will say though that not everyone has the money to spend on a bit of a toy in terms of a guitar tone here. These are very expensive and they're hard to find. And again, these are older pieces of rack gear with parts that really aren't made anymore. So if this is ending up as a dud for you, you might have a hard time servicing this and getting this thing running again, especially if the certain components and resistors are not made anymore, which is the case in point for this one, for those really special ones. And while it's very cool to run with the vintage gear and maybe integrate it in some way to like a studio tone or something, It's not really practical at all in terms of using this on a live rig. It's cool in the studio, but I would say leave this at home, especially for how much these things are running. And the fact that if you really want to control this on its own, like if you're playing out front, the only way to really control this is using a foot switch that goes into the back of this thing, which you then have to run another cable going all the way out to your pedal board. And again, that's not really conducive for a lot of players to have a single controller for a single piece of gear, whereas a lot of bands are just running multi-effects units. But in terms of living with this and integrating this into your everyday rig, this might not be the best option for it. On the flip side, this DB flanger is way easier to live with, and it does sound really great as well. My big complaint is that this pedal sounds good as either a flanger or a doubler. It doesn't really sound good as both at the same time. So you can't really toggle between a really good flanger sound and expect to have a really good doubling sound. So you kind of have to have two of these if you want a certain doubling sound or a totally different doubler pedal, and have this as a good flanger sound, because this sounds great as either a flanger or a doubler. So, but then again, one set of controls, tiny stomp box configuration, this is a pretty sweet alternative. This does sound really good. It's pretty clean sounding. My other complaint is that this has an AC power cord, so you do have to plug this into like maybe a power bar of some sort and then run it to the wall. You can't just power this off of a pedal power like a Dunlop brick or maybe like a Voodoo Labs power supply or something like that. But if you could power this from like a 9 or an 18 volt power supply, I think that would be pretty killer for this and really would knock it up a couple points in my book. In terms of living with this, it's a stomp box. It's way easier to live with, and it's a brand new piece of gear. There is going to be warranty when you buy these newer pieces of gear, unlike the older MXR unit as well. So keep all of that in mind based on which flanger doubler you are looking for to chase that iconic Dimebag sound. And that's going to do it for today's video. Thanks for checking this out. Let me know in the comments below of anything related to today's video, if you liked a certain flanger or if you just learned something new on these flangers. And once again, thanks to my buddy Matt and Ryan for loaning me the flanger doubler respectively. If you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and if you're new here, please consider subscribing. I have tons more Dimebag related content as well as other guitar related content on the channel. And if you really like what I do, make sure you hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that I upload. Thanks for checking this out, and I'll see you next time.